Okay, today I'm going to show you how I upgraded my Jeep transmission from the Peugeot BA to the AX15. You may run into some issues like I did, but I'll give you all the part numbers and let you know some links as we go here. But it's actually much easier than you think. So let's get going. All right, so I'm going to assume you already kind of know the basics of how to use basic socket set, how to remove a transmission. So obviously you're going to have to find a good AX15 transmission to start off with. There's, I guess, square one. And don't worry about the AX15 bolting up to your engine. They're all compatible. It doesn't really matter. Not really. So for reference, I could tell you that the Peugeot transmission, it actually started off in 1986 and it goes up to about 1989. So really short-lived, like 3 years, if that. The AX15, it came out right around 1989 and it goes all the way up until about 2001. So you're not going to have any trouble finding one. Pretty simple. They're all over the place. If you're wondering if there's some kind of a size difference between them, yes, there is. So the Peugeot transmission itself is about 16.5 inches long, but the AX15 is 16 7/8 inches long. So it is 1/8 of an inch longer. There are some issues you may run into, not very important, but I mean, you may want to be aware of it. So when you're going an 1/8 inch longer, you're kind of squeezing the whole back half. So the driveline, if you still have the stock driveline with a slip yoke, it's going to slip in an extra 1/8 of an inch. So not that much, but if you have a lift kit, you're not even going to notice. You'll be fine. If you have the upgraded driveline with the double cardan, you're going to be fine. But if, let's say, the lift you have is like stock or it's even sagging, and now you're putting in this transmission, you're adding an 1/8 of an inch, squeeze here. So there have been guys that reported, hey, when you're going over bumps, the drive shaft itself, it may poke into the back of the MP231 transfer case. Just something to be aware of. Not super important, but if that is you, you may have to shave like an 1/8 of an inch off of the drive shaft there at the end of the slip yoke there. So, but yeah, there you go. So now there is a slight change with these AX15 transmissions. Once we get up to about 1993 and 94, right around then, they actually had a change. It wasn't even with the transmission itself, it was just the bell housing itself. So in 94 up transmissions, you can get the slave cylinder setup on the outside of the bell housing. Major upgrade, highly recommend this one. But everything, the early years from like 89 up to 93, 94-ish, those ones all have the internal setup with the slave cylinder. So just something else here to kind of think about. To do this, along with the bell housing, you're actually going to need a handful of parts on the inside too. You're going to need a front plate here. It goes on, of course, the front. It's a front seal retainer plate. I forget the name of it, but you're also going to need the shift fork here, the throw-up bearing itself, and don't forget this little retaining clip here. It just clips the shift fork on so it can pivot correctly. As for the clutch itself, now I believe, and the cover plate that comes with it, I believe they're interchangeable. When I went to go searching for them, I noticed that the sizes are actually about the same, exactly the same. For the Peugeot or the X15, they're both 10 3/8 inch diameter and 1 1/8 inch tall or thick or whatever. So same exact size. So it doesn't actually matter if you get a clutch for a Peugeot or clutch for an AX15, they're the same, as long as they're these dimensions. Next up, you're actually going to notice the input shaft on the transmission itself is a little bit larger than the Peugeot, so you're going to have to go ahead and buy yourself a new pilot bearing for this one. For my 1989 Cherokee that I'm working on right now, it's not meant to have this transmission, so I had to get a little creative. Searched on some forums here and there, and I found some guys that said a brass pilot bearing that's normally in like the early 70s CJ Jeeps seems to work really well. And it's actually another upgrade from the original, the needle bearing one that the Peugeot had. So at this point, you've got yourself the AX15 and you've chosen your bell housing. If you want to go with the internal setup, how the early ones are, or the external, highly recommend getting the external one. Like I said, way easier. And so now that you have this AX15 and you've chosen your bell housing and you've bolted it up to your engine, now it's time to connect your transfer case. Now, if you actually ended up buying your AX15 with the transfer case, you're good. You're doing just fine. You can skip right ahead. If you want to reuse your transfer case that was bolted up to your Peugeot transmission, it's not really going to bolt up yet. You see, the Peugeot output shaft for the transmission was a 21 spline, and then of course going into the NP231 it had a 21 spline input shaft output. Anyway, they're both 21 splines, so they're not going to mate up to the AX15. It's a 23 spline. I guess more splines equal more strength or something. But so anyway, you can reuse your transfer case. You just have to change this gear out to make it 23. You will need to buy the input gear for your transfer case that has a 23 splines. It's not hard at all. It just takes some extra time, and the gear itself is like $170, I think. That's how much it was when I got it. This is actually the route I went. I ordered mine from Novak. I think there's a couple other suppliers out there, but this is the one that seems to have a lot of information. There are different types of gears too. There are short ones or long ones, or you just have to let them know. You can actually call them up and say, hey, this is the engine I have, here's transmission, here's transfer case, and they'll give you the exact parts you need. Because there are some slight differences if you're trying to mix and match from different Jeeps. It's possible, but just call them up and they'll let you know. When you do have the gear, all you have to do is just tear apart your transfer case, swap out the gears, and you're good to go. It's pretty easy. You do need to have a pair of snap ring pliers. Make sure it's a pretty good pair. If you go down to Harbor Freight or something, you get a cheap pair. They'll help you out, for this one job. But then they're trash after that. You can't use them. You have to throw them away. You'll see what I mean if you do that. Moving on, did you get the mounting bracket for the AX15? When you got the transfer case? I sure hope you did. That stupid little plate has caused me a lot of problem, and no one seems to have it. So I went down to about 3 different part yards, and they wouldn't sell me the plate. They claim that it's a part of the transmission, and they have to sell the plate with it. So they wanted me to buy a whole transmission just to get this stupid little plate. I went ahead and I just broke out the welder and I made my own. It's actually a pretty simple design, so it's really easy. I mean, it's pretty important though, because it does connect to your transfer case, to the mount, to the crossbar, the crossmember bar. And oh, by the way, looking at the crossmember now, there are some modifications you need to address here. The Jeep engineers were thinking ahead here. They pre-drilled a handful of holes, for different types of transmissions that would be going in. And with the holes here on the unibody, on the frame rail, whatever you call it, you're going to have to just really move the crossmember back a couple of holes. You're going to need to remove the original studs and tap, thread out the holes. Lastly, you're actually not going to be able to use any of your linkage from your Peugeot transmission for your four-wheel drive. Azzies actually came out with some really good products here. Again, I just broke out the welder. I made my own, but everyone seems to have different products to use. That's all you need to take out your Peugeot transmission and put in the AX15. It's not that hard, really. I mean, just a handful of parts. It can take a little bit of time to actually find all the parts and scavenge them all up, but it is definitely worth it. Now, like I said earlier, you do have the option of going with the internal or the external bell housing slave cylinder setup. Highly recommend going with the external one. So if you ever need to work on the slave cylinder, like every 3 to 5 years or something, it's just like 2 bolts right there on the outside. Good to go. Oh, that actually does remind me. The clutch itself, the internal components like the throwout bearing, the fork, the the master reservoir, the slave cylinder, all of these parts are actually the same from about 94 all the way up to 2001. With the external setup. I got myself this pre-bled all-in-one unit, which is another upgrade. You don't have to worry about any bubbles or anything like that. It has a reservoir, the hose, the slave, no bubbles, good to go. Just hook it up and go. Now, next time it fails, maybe an hour, and that's it. And it's like 4 bolts, and you replace all of it at the same time. The unit itself, it's actually a direct bolt-on part. But for my Jeep, my situation, I did need to drill out the eye before it connects into the pedal itself. But you could use a Dremel or like a 7/16 inch drill bit, because it's made out of plastic, so it's really easy. Now, lastly, I highly recommend to service all of the fluids, because of course you go in with a new transmission, you're probably playing around with the transfer case, especially if you open the transfer case. I mean, you're dumping out the fluid. Some time ago, I did post a video. I replaced all my fluids. I went from the oil pan all the way back to the axles and everything in between. So you may want to check out that video somewhere up there. I did all those videos, and I did put in some timestamps, I believe, so you can fast forward to each one. It makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, that's actually it. You feeling a little bit better about the swap? I kind of hope you are. I mean, it's not that hard. Every time I talk to someone or I see some forums, people are just saying, "Oh, it's impossible. They can't do it. There's too many parts. It's too hard. It's too complicated." But no, it's not. It's just a handful of parts, and a day, maybe 2 at most. One day to tear it down, one day to put it all back together. You're good to go. You do this in a weekend. But now you know what to look for. So I mean, I hope this video helped out some people. I did post another video telling my whole story. It was a little bit longer, but I noticed a lot of people were watching it. Not a whole lot of comments or likes or subscribing here going on, but I thought I'd make this other little shorter video, just kind of quick run through right through and let you know exactly what you need. I really do. I mean, I'm doing this to help out other people. So I mean, if this helped you out, if you learned something, maybe you got a little entertained or something, just hit the like button. It's free. Hit the subscribe button. I know that people are liking this, and I'll make some more videos. But all right, that's it.